YouTube Ozic going the Go Downs is back with the best NFL draft prospects that nobody is talking about right now. These aren't your typical sleepers. These are legit good prospects that people aren't talking about, or they think they're just day three guys. They are way more than that. Excited about this one. Let's break it down. Miles Frazier, guard, LSU. The Tigers' offensive line was really solid. There's quite a few of those prospects in this draft class alone that are fantastic. And that's not an easy scheme to be an offensive lineman in compared to some other schools, because they actually, in terms of pass protecting, they actually had to pass protect for a bit. They had a pure pocket passing quarterback, drop back, scan the field, sit in the pocket. It wasn't quick RPO, get the ball out as quick as you possibly can underneath. They wanted to scan the field, throw the ball downfield. So Frazier did a fantastic job. He's a mauler in the run game as well. Might stand out more in the run game. He's nasty, physical, dog mentality type offensive lineman. Was a fantastic guard for them. Stood out against legit defensive tackle prospects. Legit talent in the SEC. So every time I watch him, or sometimes I'm watching an SEC defensive lineman, I'm watching Frazier. He's standing out to me. So I'm a fan. Really surprised he's not being talked about more. You don't hear his name at all. And when you do, it's like hinting at maybe fourth round. I think he's going to go much earlier than that. I think he should go much earlier than where he's probably going to go. I wouldn't be against late second rounds. Could end up going third. Could he be an epic steal in the fourth? He could slide a little bit just because he needs a specific scheme probably. There's plenty of teams out there that he would fit, though. Inside zone or a gap scheme, because he's not, I guess he's not the most athletic dude, so will outside zone teams be that interested in him? If he got to a certain point, maybe they would take him. But right now, ranked as a top 5 interior offensive lineman for me. You don't really hear that much, but big fan of his game. And again, this video is about the prospects. I throw some fits in there. People that complain in these videos, like they almost act like it's a mock draft. Not what it is. But again, teams that are going to look to run, gap/man blocking schemes or inside zone. I threw some of those teams in there that just really look for the physical guards. So I think he could start early on, way better than what the chatter is right now. Another Frazier, but this is Zah Frazier from Texas San Antonio, the lengthy corner. Obviously, really solid athlete as well, looking at the combine performance. You watch him on tape, first thing that stands out is his pressability, and he's pretty sticky in man coverage. He's physical at the line, like I said, in press, and he can run with anyone down the field. But then you see some reps in zone, I'd say specifically cover 3 and cover 4, where he's really kind of on the boundary, and he can press in those situations. He really stands out. So first glance, a press man corner, but a lot of upside, a lot of instincts in zone. You see him really attack the ball, read the quarterback, attack the ball. Remember, Tariq Woolen came from Texas San Antonio. Frazier honestly might look a little better looking at their Texas San Antonio tapes. So a guy that I think he was getting a little buzz around the combine just because of the athleticism, and everyone's like, oh, it's probably one of those workout warriors. I think he's much more than that. He's easily a top 10 corner for me. There's a lot to like, again, the length, the traits, the athleticism, the ability to press, the ability to play man, the ability to play zone. NFL's really gearing towards zone these days. I think he has upside there. I wouldn't put it past him to be able to go late 2. I don't think he's going to go there, but I'm not against that. Should be an early round 3 guy, in my opinion, a lot to work with. He could end up, smaller school, didn't play the best competition. He's not missing much, though, but could end up being a 4th round steal. So I don't know. I looked at some of these teams that run mainly zone, but they're trying to mix in a little bit more man coverage. And then I threw in the Chiefs, who are mainly a man coverage team. But it just felt like a Frazier team, or a Chiefs guy, I should say. They like these lengthy, athletic corners, minus McDuffie, who worked out for them, but typically this is what they look for. Would kind of remind me of the L'Jarius Sneed pick. It actually really remind me of that, so and which worked out for them while he was there. So those are some teams that really stood out for me. Again, known as a press man guy, but he's pretty instinctive in zone. I like his upside there. Another corner, another top 10 corner for me, Nohl Williams from California. Man, go back a few years ago when he was on UNLV, transferred from UNLV to California. He went against Notre Dame a few years ago. I watched every snap of that game live, and I'm going, who is this Nohl Williams kid? This guy is a stud. He caused major problems for Notre Dame. He was using physicality, but playmaking ability. The guy, he was everywhere. I couldn't believe it. So I love when guys stand out to me that much. And here we are, a few years later after playing for California for 2 years, and I get down the list to watch tape on a guy, Nohl Williams. I'm like, oh my God, I remember Nohl Williams. And I'm watching him like, this guy's a ball player. And he's tough to figure out a specific fit because, and it's for a good reason. It's because he played a bit of everything in his career. Like, he's really solid press man. He played a bit of cover 3 and cover 4 as his own corner as well. He attacks downhill pretty well. He's feisty. He was going against Io Manor, the physical receiver at Stanford, and he was throwing him around. Like, maybe some of those moments will get called in the NFL, but I love the feistiness. I love the physicality. He's a player. You take that, maybe that's your biggest takeaway from him, but he's always around the ball. He seems to confuse quarterbacks at times. I know he wasn't going against the best quarterback play on some of those interceptions, but I usually like the guys that stood out to me years ago, and then they're still a ball player right now, obviously, when you watch them on their most recent tape. So it's a guy you do not hear his name at all right now. I don't know. I think he's a top 10 corner. I think he's probably gonna rank higher for me than maybe a guy or two that people are really talking about. Top of my head, definitely one guy, but I think he could be a round 3 talent. But he's been in college for a bit. He's not like a polarizing prospect. So if I had to predict, he probably ends up in round 4, even though he should go earlier than that. So again, tough to figure out fits because I think several types of teams will have him on their board. I think there's going to be man teams out there, and there's not as many man teams left. And again, he didn't run a ton of cover 2, but his play style, like underneath and attacking downhill, and the physicality, I think he could fit that. So it's hard for me to see any scheme scratch him off their board because they don't view him as a fit. I think he could fit just about anyone. So a name that needs to be brought up more as a legit corner prospect. Vernon Broughton, defensive tackle from Texas. We're going to talk about quite a few Longhorns here coming up. Pretty talented roster they had, but this is what this video is all about. You do not hear anything about Vernon Broughton right now, and this guy is a talented defensive tackle. On top of that, you hear all about his teammate that plays the same position, Alfred Collins. You hear about him in round 2, day 2, and they're both very, very solid. They both have the physical traits, but I have Broughton higher on my board. He's actually my number 6 defensive tackle right now. I think he's an early round 2 talent. This guy is legit, and you do not hear that at all. Again, about 6'5", 35-inch arms. I mean, he has the physical traits you look for. And the biggest difference between him and Broughton and Collins, Broughton explodes off the ball, off the snap, way better. Collins is better stopping the run, but if you combine everything you're looking for, right? They both have physical traits, but if you combine their play versus the run, their play versus the pass, the explosiveness, the athleticism, how much they disrupt in the actual pocket or backfield, that's where I give more check marks to Broughton. Even over some very notable defensive tackle prospects. I think he's one of the best after the obvious. I think there's 4 locks in the first round unless something wild happens. You guys know those names. So you just do not hear this guy's name. He actually got better as the year went on too, so maybe that's it. Maybe he doesn't have like a large sample size of day 2 play. I could agree with that, but you get to the playoff, this guy was showing up. The Arizona State game, the Ohio State game too, but the Arizona State game, I don't think the stats will show it, but this guy was unblockable in that game, exploding off the ball, making the man in front of him miss, or just using his length. So he has a lot of traits to really work with. I think he's a round 2 guy, maybe even an early round 2 guy. Top 60 tackle for me. Could end up being a round 3 steal. I really haven't heard his name. I saw someone in the comments when I had him in the mock recently saying he's probably a round 4 guy. I think he's got to go earlier than that. You could list a lot of teams here. I mean, I like the Eagles with the defensive tackles with the traits, and a team that gets the most out of them. I would love for him to land with a team like the Eagles, or I know the Bills are looking for a defensive tackle and they can grab him in round 2, a couple picks there. The Chargers, I think he'd be their best defensive tackle day 1. 49ers will really value the physical traits that he has on top of the explosiveness he has. So one of my favorite prospects in the draft, one of my favorite ones, kind of one of the poster child guys for this type of video. And what makes it, a very, very fun exercise here heading into the draft. Another Texas Longhorn, Andrew Mukuba, safety, formerly with Clemson. It feels like he was more known while he was on Clemson. People were saying like future first-round pick, like during the year. And then this year he's on Texas. And I mean, people say good things about him. It's not like nobody says anything about him right now, but it's where did that all go? And I felt like Texas got way more out of him. They really played a pro-like defense, a lot of zone coverage, a lot of changing up their looks, moving guys around a bit. This dude's a top three safety might not justify it. I think he's going to be a top 2 safety for me when it's all said and done. He's actually in consideration for the number 1 safety. I've watched a lot of film. I'm still watching the defensive backs, the safeties right now. But he's in consideration for the top safety in the class. And I'll tell you why. Who are the most valuable safeties in the NFL right now? They're guys that impact the game in so many different ways. You don't just stick them in one spot and they do one thing. Even if they're like a big-time playmaker getting their hands on the ball, they do more than that. Those are the best safeties in football. And I look at Mukuba and I'm like, this guy's got instincts down the field. You can use him split safety scheme, which is very popular in the NFL right now. It's limiting quarterback play, compared to the past. And he can use his instincts in the back end there. But, man, he can get downhill. I was surprised after watching him on tape how well he is like a downhill alley runner type safety. He's not afraid to lay a hit. He also can play in the slot. So, I mean, you can see him, again, as a split safety deep in coverage. You can see him in the slot. You can see him in cover 3 as kind of that robber safety coming up, underneath. He's in the backfield. He's downfield making plays. He's reading the quarterback's eyes. He's always making impact plays, while he was at Clemson, while he was at Texas. The knock on Mukuba is that he is a little on the thinner side, right? And he's lacking some power. Now, shedding blocks isn't a big thing when it comes to safety. It's lower on the checklist, I suppose, when it comes to safeties. But when someone is blocking him, he does have a hard time shedding him. So kind of given the lack of power, he's on the thinner side. I think he's just under 200 pounds. So is that going to be a problem for teams? Maybe. I'd actually say he's borderline a first-round talent because how much there is into his game. But because, he's a little thinner, lacking some power, probably not going to play man coverage, not really that big of a deal. That kind of makes him a second-round guy. Could end up as a third-round steal just because teams could say maybe he's a little undersized, not really with the height, but everywhere else. So we'll wait to take him. So I think he can be an absolute steal. Like him in his own defense, using his instincts. So you see, we listed some of those teams that could be looking for a safety that run a lot of zone. But a good mixture of, again, they could use him anywhere. They can use him as a split safety. Could use him in the slot. Cover 3, you can use him as the strong safety. I mean, that's why I like Mukuba so much, and he's been a fantastic ball player for Clemson and Texas. Another Texas Longhorn. Promise I'm not a Texas fan. I'm a Notre Dame fan. But Jaydon Blue, I've been hyping up Blue for some time. Even back when people were calling him like late day 3 or undrafted. But this dude is an explosive home run hitter, elite speed at the running back position. He has elite route running ability in the backfield or in the slot even. So that is kind of rare, even though there's some good pass catchers in this class. He's not an every down back. He's not a starting back. He's a high-end running back, too. That brings you some pass-catching ability, some home run ability. He will fumble the ball a little bit, so that's something he can work on. But this is a guy that sees the hole, hits the hole, and he can fly after it, and he can do more than just that. So as a top 8 running back for me, I'll have him higher than some other very notable names, obviously. I think he's a round 3 guy. He could end up being a 4th-round guy just because, he's not a number 1 running back, not a guy that can handle a load, especially on inside runs. Again, does have some fumbles, but, looking at some teams, running back needy teams that, would really value his pass-catching ability, but his explosiveness as well. Those are the teams, but you can list several teams here, but those are the ones that are standing out. Danny Stutsman, inside linebacker from Oklahoma, was a huge name during his college career, but that just completely went away. Nobody talks about this guy anymore. It's almost like acting like he's a day 3 linebacker, but he's so much more than that. I have him as a top 4 linebacker right now, and that's with Jalen Walker as a linebacker. So I have Walker, Campbell, Schwessinger, and then I have Stutsman. And he's different than the other linebackers. People say maybe he's a little too old school. He's not super, super flashy, but there is kind of a lack of inside linebackers or just linebackers in general in this class that read the run well on top of getting downhill, filling the correct gaps, and making a stop, a form tackle, making a big-time stop. You don't see that consistently. There's guys that can tackle, of course. There's guys that can fly downhill, but are they reading the run correctly? Are they filling the right gaps? And he does that consistently, very consistently. So, but I guess that's kind of what makes him more of an old school linebacker. But man, he's sneaky athletic. You saw it at the combine. I think he's underrated as a coverage guy. It's not the best part of his game, but I think he's fairly solid. So he kind of gives you some old school and new school vibes kind of put together. So, a team just looking for a linebacker that is smart, that really can stop the run first, like more importantly, which I'm a fan of. A lot of teams really struggle to stop the run this year, so I do really value stopping the run on defense, whether it's a passing league or not. So I think I wouldn't be against him going late round 2 at all. Could end up going in the 3rd. I don't see him getting to day 3 still, but could end up being a late 3rd round pick, I would say. Buccaneers make a lot of sense. Looking for an inside linebacker for the future. They really value guys that stop the run. I can see him in Al Golden's defense, who really values linebackers as well. With the Bengals, again, Mike McDonald, pair him with Ernest Jones. It seems like a really solid fit. Raiders are pretty desperate for some linebackers. He'd be a guy that could replace a guy like Robert Spillane. So those teams stood out. Could obviously throw some more in there, but it's almost like this was one of those college hype guys, and that's what people were acting like by not talking about him anymore. But he's legit. He's actually different in a good way from pretty much the rest of the class. Tai Felton, I've talked about him a bit before, the Maryland receiver, a massive fan, a top 7 receiver for me. I'm just firm on it. He's a round 2 talent. I'm trying to find things that he is lacking. He's not really missing much at all from his game. Like, he's got some decent length. Looking at today's receiver standards, the best in football are 6'1". Looking at Chase and Jefferson, he's got that build to him. He's got elite speed, or elite athleticism, I should say, with his speed and his leaping ability. And that's just a bonus to me. That's not what he is. He tracks the ball so well down the field. He fights off defenders, corners without interfering. He's, again, really good on the home run balls down the sideline, tracking it, but going across the middle of the field, he's deadly as well. I like him more as an outside receiver, but he most definitely could play in a slot. He's a really good return man as well. I'm just trying, and you look at some of these games he played. I mean, there's not too many receivers in any class that you could say this about, but, and I've said it before, there are a few games, USC, Michigan State, there's a few games that Virginia, I want to say, just trying to remember what I watched on tape, where he was not just dominant, but the defenses they didn't know how to respond. They had no answer to him. USC's answer was maul him. I mean, they wrapped him up. They were tackling him back there. They're drawing PIs like crazy. So I'm trying to figure out, like, most people's talk is day 3 even. To me, he's a round 2 guy. There's no chatter of that. Maybe he's a round 3. I do not see him getting to round 4. Super talented. Would love him on the Chargers pairing with Ladd McConkey. Seems like the Packers kind of wait for guys, and they end up taking guys that everyone's going, wasn't a huge name. Did they take him too early and they end up being pretty decent? Could be that. I love the fit with the Texans. I just see Nico Collins as an X, Christian Kirk as the Y, and Felton as the Z in that offense. It seems like a really good fit. In the Jags, pair him with Brian Thomas Jr. I could see that as well. I could list a lot of teams. I like the Titans as a fit. I'm just trying to figure out I'm looking at the draft order, like where would they take them, because they will really value speed, it sounds like, at the receiver position, and just also feels like a Brian Callahan type receiver. So I wanted to put the Titans in there. Where are they going to take him? They're probably going to take a more notable name in early. If they take Felton with that very early 2nd round pick, I think the whole world will be like, him that early? And I'd be like, clap it up. So maybe, I don't know. But a lot of teams could be interested. I said the Lions, I think, in a mock as well, because they actually could use another receiver, and it just seems like they end up drafting guys that I like a lot over the years. So massive Tai Felton fan. I've kind of been hyping him up for a little bit. So one of my favorite players in the class, obviously. Another receiver prospect, Tory Horton from Colorado State, an outside receiver that's a really solid route runner, but tracks the ball incredibly well. He was injured for most of this past year, and he plays for Colorado State, so I'm going to assume that's why people really aren't talking about him enough. He gets a little bit of chatter, obviously, but the top 10 receiver for me, I like him as an early round 3 talent. The day 2 of the draft is full of legit receiver prospects. Is this, in general, one of the best receiver classes we've seen? No, we've seen better ones in the past, but if you look at day 2 alone, I mean, we might have guys go into early day 3 maybe like this because how deep it is in day 2, but other than the injury, there's a lot to like. He's athletic, he's long, he tracks the ball well, he can make contested catches, he's a really solid route runner. along the boundary especially. So we'll see where he ends up going. Trying to list some other receiver needy teams that we didn't talk about much yet, but I could see those teams kind of getting him late 3, early 4, maybe more likely is where he goes. But I think he needs a little bit more love. I think a lot of these guys like Felton, Horton are more in the conversation with these guys, these day 2 guys that are being talked about on social media every single day. Like, put these guys in that conversation, in my opinion. I don't know. Kyle Kennard, South Carolina pass rusher. I always say it. The first thing I look for, just me personally, when watching edge rushers, is how explosive they get off the ball, off the snap. And he's one of the best in the class, actually. He explodes off the ball. He's got legit length, 34-inch arms, and he's got production. You wish he was a little more physical. He gets knocked off balance quite a bit, so that's kind of the knock. If he didn't have that knock, I mean, we'd be talking late first round, early second maybe. But I love the way he explodes off the ball. Makes offensive tackles miss. He doesn't really win with power enough, which is kind of a thing in this class, and that's kind of what's keeping me from saying it's a really good edge class. But there's not a long list of guys that can consistently win with power. It's a lot of speed, or some guys that are undersized so they can't do it. But that's kind of what he's lacking a little bit. But sometimes he wins using his length. But if he could add a little bit more, I mean, he looks big enough, but if he could add a little bit more strength, which is very doable in an NFL program, obviously, then he could be something special. So he's a guy, I'm almost tempted to call him a round 2 guy just because of that, but there are other pass rushers, and again, you see him get knocked off balance a little bit, but I love the explosibility, I love the production, the way he closes in on the quarterback, on the ball. So top 12 edge rusher for me. Round 3 guy, could end up slipping to round 4 possibly. He almost feels like a 4-3 end, but I think because of the power thing and the athleticism that he has, maybe he ends up as a 3-4 outside linebacker. It doesn't really matter to me. I think he could fit either scheme. So those are some teams that kind of stood out to me that'll really value the length that he has and the athleticism and the production altogether there. Logan Brown, offensive tackle from Kansas, and he was with Wisconsin for a bit, and it did not work out there. He got dismissed, actually. So maybe that's why people don't talk about him, and they're kind of writing him off because it didn't work out. He's got 1 year starting at Kansas, but man, he was really good offensive tackle for them this year. Very efficient, didn't allow much in terms of pressure, didn't really get beat much at all. He's really quick, got some good athletic traits, can move around, can get outside, downfield, hit the next level blocks. Just a guy that needs a little bit more love here. So top 10 offensive tackle for me. I think with the lack of depth at the tackle position in this class, I think you take a shot at him in round 3, but I think he could end up in the 4th round. There's not much chatter for him, and there's some specific fits. I mean, I really like those first 3 teams, the Niners, Dolphins, Texans. Seems like a really, really good fit, and he possibly could start for those teams if it's not right away, maybe early on in his career. So a guy you just do not hear his name really at all. I thought he had a really good season, and he has athletic traits, and he shows it on the field with his quickness. The foot quickness there. So it's a guy you want to work with at the same time. Kind of curious to see what happened. Know what happened with the background of Wisconsin, why that didn't work out. But a better tackle than people are given credit for here. So that does it for this video. Really enjoyed this one, talking about guys that really, it's just surprising the lack of talk about them. These are legit. They're not just sleepers. They are legit prospects and need to be treated as such. And maybe the NFL will on draft weekend. So excited about that. We have similar videos like this on the channel. We have a recent 3-round mock draft on the channel. A lot more content to get to before day 1. We'll be live right here on the channel covering day 1, and then live analysis on Twitter as well moving forward after that. So join us. It's going to do it. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.